What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some news about all of the upcoming CRPGs that I'm looking forward to, and in many ways this is just in fact a big news update, though there are one or two additions since the last time we've discussed this, because this is in fact a video that I make roughly every quarter, every 6 months, give or take, depending on what's going on, in large part because the CRPG space, while admittedly still a little niche even these days, does in fact have a lot of updates and stuff going on. It's usually stuff that is very difficult to fit into a singular video for them, and so I've taken to making these videos to sort of bring all of that into one place to keep people informed to the best of my ability and also share the stuff I'm excited about. Which I tell you because you have almost certainly heard me talk about at least a couple of these previously if you watch the channel much, but there is at least a little bit of interesting news for almost every single one of these, which is why I decided to go ahead and make this video, as I thought people were due an update. But with all of that said, let's actually go ahead and jump into it. Kicking it off first, talking a little bit about Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy, Owlcat's upcoming follow-up to Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, and seeing how I cover basically everything Owlcat does to this day. Obviously, people have heard me talk about this one, but Dark Heresy is doing a lot of interesting things that I've covered in plenty of other videos. However, what I wanted to mention here specifically is that they mentioned over on Twitter that they are going to be having the alpha later this year, which we should get an exact day for, basically, on Warhammer Day. And if you don't know, that is October 25th, so here in about a week we should know roughly when the alpha testing for Dark Heresy is going to begin. And that is very likely the first time much of anybody outside of Owlcat will be jumping in to play this for themselves, so hopefully more to talk about there soon. Otherwise, let's keep it moving. Technically speaking, a new addition, though I've also talked about this one in a dedicated video recently. This is Starfinder Afterlight, the official Starfinder project that is telling its own unique story in the Starfinder universe, sister TTRPG to Pathfinder, or technically the same universe, but slightly different branding, obviously. Not to get bogged down in the specifics, this game had a Kickstarter that they were using to fund extra bits to the game that they wanted to make. Like, the core of it was already funded and sorted out, but they wanted to raise some extra funds to pursue things like more voice acting, frankly, and that Kickstarter has been a pretty smash success. So not only are we getting a Starfinder game, but it looks like they're going to be able to expand on it feature-wise quite a bit from what was initially funded as like the sort of core experience, which is obviously pretty exciting all around. They are a little bit old, but I've actually made some videos talking about Starfinder up to this point, so if you're curious about that setting, it may be something worth checking out. Very generally, though, I will say that they are using Starfinder 2e, and I think those old videos are more of a 1e focus. But you should be able to get the idea of what it's all about, at the very least, outside of just watching the actual videos I've made for Starfinder. But far from over yet. Third, we have the imminent release of Avernum 4, Greed and Glory, a remake to Avernum 4, of course. This is a game that I actually also backed on Kickstarter when it was initially announced as a project. I've known this was coming all year, and in fact I played through the first 3 Avernum games just to get caught up to speed, though that is not entirely necessary, given that Avernum 4 is actually the start of the second trilogy and a decent enough entry point to people who are interested. Either way, though, this game is releasing in full on October 22nd, so just a few days away, but it's actually, thanks to Steam Next Fest, has a demo available right now, so you could try it out for yourself if you wanted to. And from having played that demo a little bit already, it does actually look to be making some not insignificant changes to some of the basic gameplay stuff, and I know they've also added things that weren't in the original Avernum 4 as well. So it'll be fun for me to go over that relatively soon. I've got other things I have to knock out of the way first, but an Avernum 4 review will be coming up in the next few weeks, which brings us to then Pathfinder The Dragon's Demand, another game that was already put through a Kickstarter cycle, utilizing Pathfinder 2e, and a very, I would say, unique and probably signature for this game style with its minis and things. Not much new to report here. They have put out some updates talking about various mechanics, in particular one of them that focused on character movement and how these minis would engage with the world and be able to like use their skills to climb up buildings and terrain, and the verticality of that despite the miniatures is honestly looking really good. I still don't think this game is like near to release or anything. We've got a while to go yet. yet, but it looks like they are making good progress over there. Speaking of good progress, Solasta 2, a game I am very excited to jump into and play for myself, outside of course, the demo that they've had available. But while I've already covered a great deal of the experience up to this point and talked about what Solasta 2 is changing and improving from the first game, outside of a very huge leap just visually, the main thing I wanted to mention it for in this particular video is actually that they have been sort of teasing the early access release of this game, which is, I would say, more than likely coming before the year is out. In particular, I think they are planning to drop a new trailer on like the 23rd or something, so it's very likely that we will get an early access release date sooner rather than later, which again, I'm pretty excited for. Looking forward to seeing more of what they've got in store for us here. Now, the rest of these, before we get to the miscellaneous stuff, is going to be a bit of a quick fire section, as these other ones have less overall to mention, but kicking it off first with Banquet for Fools, a very bizarre little game that I've enjoyed quite a bit. Being developed by a two-person team, Hannah and Joseph Games, it's got an incredibly distinct visual style and is set in the world of one of their previous games, Serpent in the Staglands. Banquet for Fools has been in early access for a while, but looks to have a release date of January 23rd, so not too much longer to wait for the full version of that to be released. Next up, we've got Swordhaven, the Iron Conspiracy, another game that's been in early access for quite some time, this one being a reimagining of the Infinity Engine games and CRPGs from the makers of Atom RPG. They are growing ever closer to a full release of their game, and while we don't have an exact release date, sometime later this year, or perhaps Q1, I think is pretty likely at this point, but either way, basically just waiting for release on this one so I can go ahead and review it. Then there is the Way of Wrath, an odd upcoming CRPG that puts you in the role of a tribe that needs to fend off an incoming attack, with you having multiple ways through that scenario, and of course ways you can prepare and things like that. And having played a demo of this previously, I was very intrigued. While it's been pretty radio silence on this one for a while, though it is supposed to be releasing sometime later in 2025, and we're kind of running out of room there, they mentioned that they'll be putting up a new dev diary towards the end of the month that should have some sort of announcement with it, so I mean, one way or another, we'll hear what's going on with this one soon, I imagine, and be able to plan accordingly. Either way, though, looking forward to taking a look at it. Then we've got the upcoming Sector Unknown, a CRPG being largely made by one person, I believe. This one's been in early access for a little while as well, but is for the most part pretty well done. They're also shooting for release here in the next few months, either by the end of the year or sometime Q1 of next year. So another one we won't have to wait too much longer for, hopefully, but Sector Unknown is a very interesting game that, again, playing the demo actually roped me in on, with the premise being that you need to, with some help, establish a sort of dominant faction on a host of planets so you can fend off an incoming attack by any means necessary, or, you know, whatever you deem to be the most appropriate, I suppose. But honestly, shaping up to be a pretty cool one, even if it is obviously very indie. Some more well-known ones here towards the end of the list. Then we have Shadow of the Road. They are taking part in the Galaxies showcase, which is happening a little later this month, and they're going to be showing off some gameplay of their Netherworld area, which is a place they have not shown previously, and I think it's pretty likely they may well have some other stuff planned for that showcase as well. And as a reminder, Shadow of the Road is being published by Owlcat Games, so I'm a little curious what they've got going on. And they're also taking part in Steam Next Fest if you'd like to play this one a bit for yourself, but the gist of it is basically that it is, of course, feudal Japan mixed with magic and steampunk, which will make for likely a unique experience at the very least. Speaking of steampunk, however, we then have Newark Line. No real news on this one, just pointing out that I'm still keeping an eye on it. Newark Line is a, I would say, spiritual successor to a game like Arcanum that obviously has a big focus on like steampunk, dieselpunk, that kind of thing, and magic and whatnot. They've put out one big update for their early access release, which brought in like a new race and class for you to play around with. But pretty quiet progress over there otherwise, so we'll have to see a little later on if they have anything to actually show us. But for now, that's pretty much what there is to know on that one. Second to last in this, we've got Greedfall 2. Greedfall 2 continuing to be I would say, follow-up in some ways mechanically to something like Dragon Age Origins, the more I see of it. This is another one that has been making slow but very steady progress as they march towards release, though I think this one is still a ways off. In fact, from the looks of things, they seem to have launched into early access very early even. But either way, in their latest updates that are going to be going live in November 17th, I think, which should bring a brand new explorable area to the game alongside updating things like crafting and overhauling their armor systems as this game continues to take more and more shape. So while it is going, they do seem to be making strides in the appropriate direction, and we'll have to see how it pans out in the end, but either way, still keeping an eye on that one. And then last but not least for this main section of games here, we have Temple of Elemental Evil and its Steam release. Originally due out in September, it has now been pushed to sometime in Q4 of 2025, which is obviously of note, but the Steam release of this game is promising to incorporate some of the work mods have done to keep it playable, basically, while also adding some stuff on their own. The thing is, they've been very quiet about what that actually is, and so while my hope is that they are planning on releasing this as just a much more stable version than what you can get over on GOG with some of the biggest problems fixed, I, truth be told, don't obviously know how much that will actually be true, because obviously we don't have it in our hands yet, but I will cover it as soon as I can. But honestly, my hope is that this delay is a positive thing and they are actually putting in work to make sure this is the best possible version of this game out there that runs on modern hardware really well, but we'll simply have to wait and see. Nonetheless, I will keep barking up that tree until it releases. Now, to end the video, I've got a couple DLCs and some miscellaneous stuff I want to mention that is of note, but not obviously up to a full game. For starters, Black Geyser Couriers of Darkness is getting a DLC release for its Tales of the Moon Cult DLC. Black Geyser was a unique and I would say odd CRPG that released quite some time back, and they have since, of course, focused on making this DLC, which will be available as part of the campaign in the later parts of the game, that promises to bring things like new areas, mechanics, the usual stuff you would probably expect from a full-blown expansion-sized DLC, centering around the Cult of the Night Goddess. Now, sadly, this one has picked a very rough release date of October 22nd, which is not far along at all, in fact, just a couple days from now, but reality is, there's like 3 full games releasing on the 22nd and other stuff I have to cover, so my hopes for being able to make a video about this specifically are simply not high. Nonetheless, speaking of DLC, we also know now that Rogue Trader is getting 2 more DLC, but none of them will be soon, as they are both slated for like the middle of next year in 2026. But either way, there will be more Rogue Trader in our future. And then last but not least, something that I mentioned much earlier this year, Pillars of Eternity 1's upcoming turn-based mode that they plan on adding into that well over a decade-old title at this point, in what was a bit of a surprise announcement. But it's obviously getting pretty late in the year, and we have not seen anything about that, so what's going on there? Well, I don't have any official answers for you, truth be told. I actually just wanted to mention that just a couple weeks ago there was sort of big shakeup in the gaming space about older games that use the Unity engine, because there was some very big security flaw that was found and discovered, and as a result, a bunch of games from all sorts of places had to be patched to fix this, and Pillars 1 was one of those games, and so I would imagine that probably put them a little bit behind on this, but that has been all resolved and sorted out now. It's back on the store and everything, so hopefully, with any luck, it won't be too much longer before we wind up hearing something about this, which should be fun for me to check out at the very least. But I think that is just about everything I have currently got to say about pretty much everything going on with the CRPGs I am interested in, but by all means, if there's something you want to mention down below, certainly feel free to do so, which obviously means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.